That time of year again, isn't it? This is the year I teach my kids how to use this. You know, pruning is a very natural thing. It's the way of the world, really. It's the way of nature. But it's hard to get that because it has such a, well, it's not easy to think about. Do you know that trees and other plants, when they're under duress and when they're under attack by certain insects, a tree will send out a chemical signal to the other trees in the area, telling them, get ready. There's an attack coming. And how many of you like the smell of fresh cut grass? Yeah, some of you? I know that just has a spring smell to it, right? The first cut of the season. Interestingly, that in part comes from a chemical that the grass releases when it's cut. It's the same kind of idea when the grass is under attack, like a tree. Something's munching on it, like an insect. The grass will release this chemistry, and that's part of the smell that we get. It alerts the other plants that are in the area. Now, this is interesting because it suggests to us that not even trees and bushes and grass, not even they like to be pruned. It might look good, right? And they don't know that in most cases it's good for them to be pruned, right? If you let a tree just grow without pruning, you know what happens, right? Ultimately becomes an unhealthy tree. It can't go on forever. It has to be trimmed, and since it can't trim itself, it needs help, typically us. The same thing, I'd like you to take a challenge today. I would, if you haven't mown your lawn yet, I would like you to wait until Labor Day. Okay? At Labor Day, I want you to see what happens. I want you to see, because I imagine two things are going to happen. One is that your grass is going to be so tall, it's going to be unruly, it's going to be unhealthy. You will have ruined your lawn, really, for the next couple of years. That's the first thing. The second thing is you'll be able to count, at least on two hands, how many times your neighbors give you the look. Right? Like, what's wrong with you? Why haven't you mowed? So this notion of pruning, while we do it all the time, is a little bit difficult because pruning almost always involves something sharp. Right? Almost always. I looked at my garage yesterday before I decided to pick this. We have all sorts of sharp stuff. Little scissor type stuff for the little branches, right? And then you get the bigger ones for the bigger branches, and then you got this for the bushes, right? We've got all sorts of sharp implements for pruning. And who wants to be cut, not the least of all trees and grass, by something really sharp? I mean, think about it even in your own lives. When you do your own pruning, right? The nails get a little bit long. What do you got? Something sharp, right? Your hair. Got to prune it. Even the longest of hair. Well, some of you don't have to prune it, but you get what I'm getting at, right? It gets long, and you gotta prune it. Something sharp. You can't believe how many times, whether it's us or in our yard, we get out there with something sharp and we're going to cut. And when Jesus says today, my Father's the vine grower and I am the vine and you are the branches and the branches get cut, we want to back up a little bit, right? Because in our heart of hearts, we know that we don't like pruning. Even stuff that we know needs to get cut out. Even the stuff in our lives, the prejudices, the isms that we carry around, the difficulties, or maybe it's an illness, and we hate being sick, but if it involves a knife, right, from a doctor, we maybe don't want to get involved with it. We'd maybe rather keep it, which doesn't make any sense. But pruning is hard. Maybe you have some kind of sickness that requires that you have to eat in a different way, or sleep in a different way, or you've got a cast or something. Whatever it is, we don't want to do that. But God reminds us in the gospel lesson that pruning, when it's with God, is meant to bear fruit. It's not meant to harm. Now, how do we know this? Well, there are plenty of people who will tell you that they're Christians, and then they will also tell you that if you don't get right with God, if you don't prune out all your sin, if you don't get rid of all that stuff inside you, you're going to burn like those branches. Right? You're going to be thrown into the fires of hell because your branches weren't pruned. Or if you don't bear fruit, if you don't volunteer for everything at church, right? If you're not perfect, if you're not whatever, fill in the blank. If you're a branch that doesn't bear fruit, you're not worthy, and you're going to get thrown into the fire. And that's crazy. Garbage. God does not have some kind of divine weed whacker, some divine bush cutter. And God is not just waiting around a corner to prune you the minute you step out of line. That's not grace. If that was true, then the cross loses all meaning and power. It's pointless. Instead, God says this: you're my child, and I love you, but I know you got stuff in you that's holding you back. I know you got stuff in you that becomes a barrier to what you want to do, or how you want to live, or how you want to interact with your Christian brothers and sisters. I know there's stuff in there. Now, sometimes you need to prune it. Sometimes there are people or places or things or whatever it might be in our lives that simply need to be pruned so we can bear fruit, and that hurts. But that's reality. And then there are other things in our lives that aren't good or bad, morally. They just are standing in the way. I intend to get up every morning and walk my steps. And the only steps I walk are to the closet for my clothes. And that's about where it ends. So I have to get them. We have all of these things we say we're going to do, but we need that, whatever it is that holds us back, to be pruned, to be cut back. God shows us that pruning is not meant to hurt us, but to build us up, to help us bear more fruit. And how do we know this? You see, in the Garden of Gethsemane, we still remember Easter. I know it was a ways back, but it still lingers there. And you'll remember during Holy Week, right? Jesus kneels down and he prays in the garden. He says, Father, I would really rather not be this sacrifice. I would really not get pruned out of your kingdom right now. You can almost imagine Jesus thinking, if you just give me a couple more months, I can get more disciples, we'll get more followers, I'll do a few more miracles, we'll build the megachurch, then I can go. But then after a little bit more prayer and reflection, Jesus realized this is my time of pruning. And I'm afraid, yes, because I'm human. But I also know that the vine grower is not going to destroy the vine. That Jesus would not be destroyed by that pruning, but cut back a little so that he could bear more fruit. And he did in that empty tomb, and he did in our lives, and does in our lives all the time. And we think that we're just not good enough to be a branch, and that we're not bearing fruit, and that we should just get thrown in the fire, like sometimes we all think, at our lowest moments. Even that fire, God uses for growth. Because you see, you probably all heard about those other trees out west. When the forest fires come through, those seeds have to have the heat. They have to have the fire in order to sprout. That burning creates new soil. Those branches that are cut out, that are pruned, that are no longer needed, are not just cast away, but they're used to create more soil, new soil, so that we might grow even more. And I know that's hard to hear if you're struggling and suffering. But it doesn't all happen at once. It's a process. You don't get pruned one day and new life the next. It's a process. But know this. This is not God's primary tool. After the first service, some people asked me if I was going to plug it in. No. Get away from me. But if you think this is God's tool for pruning you, think again. It is not out of anger, not out of rage, not out of spite that God calls us to be pruned. It is out of love. It is out of grace, so that we might grow. Grow into places we don't always know, but grow. Amen.